Today we are asking, is there anything we can learn from bad stories? Hey, and welcome to As the Crow Writes. My name is Britton Tyler, or BT. Here we have with us, of course, Jesse Fernandez. Jesse, how are we doing today?
So good, so good. I'm ready to talk about some truly terrible stories.
Good. Okay, well, hopefully we can bring some different perspectives here because my bad may be a little different from your bad in terms of like how we're defining it. So define what you think is bad.
Gosh, what is bad? I think trying to define bad is probably like as subjective as like trying to define good. One way to think of it is like a guilty pleasure, where it's like one of those things that if you recommend it to a friend, you'd be like, okay, just like give it a chance. That's how I like kind of define it. One of them for me is the Fast and Furious, just franchise as a whole. That movie series is so amazingly terrible, but also just amazing. The one I'll be talking about today is Fast and Furious 7. The movie like literally starts with this incredible scene of this villain standing in front of his mom and going, "Don't worry, mom, I'll avenge you." And it like pulls back as he's walking out of the hospital, and you get to see the results of him mowing down this hospital. There's like lights sparking, and there's like police officers groaning as they're holding bullet wounds. And it's such a great villain introduction scene, but you have to suspend so much disbelief to even get to that point. The Fast and Furious movies as a whole really teach how much you can get away with the rule of cool. A writer's inclination is to be like, okay, if I'm going to have something cool happen, I need to explain it. The rule of cool basically says like, if something is cool enough and an audience really wants to believe it, sometimes they will make huge logical jumps to be like, yeah, you know what? That's okay. I'm just gonna roll with it. Another example I think of is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character gets his arm broken, and later in the movie, his team needs him. He's watching on the news as like the villain is getting away and the heroes are losing, and he is sitting there in the hospital with his cast.
Daddy's gotta go to work.
And he flexes so hard that his cast explodes. And it's so silly, but as an audience, you're like, that is so cool. I'm willing to suspend every piece of logic in my brain that's saying that that's so stupid. And I think that's something to be learned about narrative in general, that I think you can sometimes get too caught up in these like dumb little things like logic. At the end of the day, just like make a story that people want to read.
If you're able to pull off something that's convincing, and I mean that as in you lay groundwork for maybe a certain character trait or a certain plot point, and you make it convincing enough, you can almost get away with anything if you do it well enough. What was your other example though of, okay, this is just bad?
The book that I'm thinking of is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I believe it was one of her first books, and it shows. I think the main problem it has is it does not understand what it's promising. We talked about it in the last video where every single story is asking questions, but you have to be aware of the questions that you're asking and the questions that your reader want answers to by the end of the book. Now, you can decide not to give your readers answers to those questions, but you should do it intentionally. Basically, there are two plot lines. There's a romance between the protagonist and one of the side characters, and then there's another plot line of like an assassin's tournament, and it sets up as if both of these plot lines are going to be as relevant as the other one. And then by like the 3/4 mark, the tournament assassin just kind of like falls off, and it doesn't really end up mattering very much, and it's really just becomes a romance story. So much so that the last fight of the assassin tournament is like half a paragraph of her just stabbing someone. But it set up the wrong promises of setting up all these stakes of this assassin tournament and making it so her life is on the line if she doesn't do this. And that's the author asking the question, like, is the main character going to live through this horrible event of this tournament? And I don't think the author realized that. The author was like, oh, I'm just writing a romance book. And then there's this like framed story that doesn't really matter. That would have been fine if that was set up from the beginning, but it wasn't. So I think that's an example to me of a story that is broken structurally, and how even small tweaks could turn this book from like a 4 out of 10 to like a 7 out of 10.
I see. So yeah, you're talking about payoff. If you're going to set something up, you want it to resolve, but not only resolve, have it be resolved in a satisfying way, or even better, if it could tie into the other plot threads that have been laid down.
So those are my examples of what I would consider terrible stories, but I think there are nuggets of wisdom in them. What are your stories?
The first example is Alien Covenant. I think the main problem I have with it is that it's filled with plot conveniences, to put it another way, characters doing really stupid things. And it becomes very obvious that without these characters doing XYZ thing, the plot really wouldn't move forward so that the film could, hit the beats that it was trying to hit. Once that became obvious or apparent, it does take you out of the scene a bit, and you're just like, okay, that was really dumb. And so suddenly you forget about what's going on, you forget about the stakes, all these things. I have actually watched this movie many, many times since its release, and oddly enough, I like it more every time I watch it. It sounds wild, but it is one of those movies that I'm borderline gonna defend now, but I still be like, okay, why do I like this so much? What's so interesting about it? One, I love the previous films, so there's probably a slight bias there, honestly. But two is I really love the lore that it builds out, and it's so mysterious and eerie. I think I really love the mood that it sets, because it's really interesting when we're talking about who created the alien. Who are these weird engineer people? What role do the humans play in all of this? All these really interesting questions. And me, with my science fiction background, I love that stuff. So basically, I come back to that movie again and again, but it absolutely has its problems that is quite frustrating. And I know a lot of people have even written this movie off in the whole franchise. They just like, okay, it doesn't exist. I'm not going to watch it again. And that bums me out because, again, I love it. Now, my second one, it's going to be The Lost World. The Lost World, I feel like it is not as well received, or was not as well received as the original Jurassic Park. Both written by Crichton. The quick backstory is that he never intended to write a sequel. Crichton's not really a sequel writer. He doesn't do that. But Jurassic Park was so popular that they made the film, and obviously it took off. Wonderful film by Spielberg. And a lot of those producers, executives, and whatever, they said, hey, Crichton, we would love a sequel. Can you do this? They finally got him to say yes. He wrote The Lost World. They proceed to make a film on it, and then they use like loosely the narrative of the book. Basically, The Lost World I think is a good novel, but it has its conveniences as well. He actually sort of retcons what happens in the first novel, specifically with, hey, we have this character, Malcolm. He is a scientist, and you really don't know his ending. It's left up, ambiguous, but he pretty much probably dies at the end of the first book. Well, now he's the main character in the second book. So that already kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth at the get. Essentially, the plot is there's a secret island that was forgotten.
Another island?
Yes, essentially it's a secret lost island. And the one that they were experimenting on, they left some dinos there that didn't work out, basically. They end up going to this island. And and then again, you ask yourself, why would people go to this island if they knew what happened at Jurassic Park? I think what I took away from that is we don't always need to force another narrative. Sometimes it can just be left alone, and that's okay. I've seen it work out in scenarios where it is really good. You can keep exploring, you can keep digging into some of the backstory, the lore of different things that you've created. Other times, I think it's fine just to leave it as is. And credit to Crichton, I think that he knew it probably should have been left alone. But paychecks and people being pushy.
Sequels are funny because it's like you get like a Terminator 2 and it's like, wow, this is like everything in the first movie but better. And then sometimes you get a Terminator 3 and it's like, wow, I wish this kind of wasn't made.
Exactly. So I think that's one of the takeaways, is that sometimes you just need to know, probably time to hang this one up. Actually, what comes to mind with that same thread here is like The Witcher. I think Sapkowski is still writing things in that world, and I'm pretty sure it's run its course. But when it comes to success and the popularity of certain IPs, I think that it becomes enticing. But again, I think that do your story justice. Sometimes it can just exist on its own. Understand, sometimes mystery is better. Let us know if you have any of your, whether it's guilty pleasures or stories you didn't enjoy, yet you did find something useful out of them. And maybe how did you implement it into your own writing and storytelling?
I think at the end of the day, this to me shows that like as a reader, you should always be reading and watching and playing different things outside of your genre, things that you even think might be not for you, because I think there's something that you can learn from almost everything that you watch, even terrible things like Throne of Glass or Lost World. There's enjoyment to be had in broken stories. So explore worlds, write things that are terrible, because you will also learn things from writing those terrible stories. Some of my early works are horrible, but I would not have learned the narrative rules that I've learned over the years if I had not written them. Same thing with watching them. So don't be afraid to watch terrible things and write terrible things and play terrible things, because I swear they are not wasted time.
Yes, I would totally agree with you. I would say that when you do engage with these bad stories, and maybe not even bad, maybe just a mixed bag. It doesn't have to be bad, but if you're not enjoying it, that's okay. And you can ask yourself, why am I not enjoying this? So yeah, that'll about do it from us. We will see you next time. Bye.